The paper was yellowed and brittle, tucked deep into the hollow frame of the bedroom mirror where no one should have found it. The handwriting was jagged, pressed so hard into the index card that the pen had torn through in several places. It read, "If you hear someone breathing under the floorboards tonight, do not drop anything through the gaps." Sitting alone in that silent hallway, 3 miles from the nearest paved road, Mark realized 2 things at once. First, the previous house-sitter had not left the property because she got homesick. And, second, the quiet, rhythmic rasping sound currently coming from beneath his floor cushion was not the house settling. It was getting closer. To understand why that brief message still keeps Mark awake years later, we have to go back to the beginning of that October. Mark was 24, working freelance, and looking for a quiet place to focus on his work, when a wealthy couple posted an advertisement seeking a long-term house sitter for their sprawling timber home in rural Oregon. It felt like the perfect opportunity. The pay was generous, and the terms were simple. Maintain the property, water the indoor plants, and stay for 3 full months while the owners traveled through Europe. The agency mentioned in passing that the previous sitter, a young woman named Sarah, had left abruptly after only 12 days. Mark assumed she simply could not handle the isolation. The house sat at the end of a long, gravel driveway, surrounded by dense evergreen trees that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. It was an impressive wooden structure, built in the late 90s, with vaulted ceilings and large glass windows that looked out into the thick forest. The agency had left the keys under a heavy stone near the side door, along with a printed list of household routines. The owners had left explicit instructions about locking the heavy deadbolts at sunset and keeping the basement door locked at all times. Everything seemed mundane enough. Mark settled into the guest room, unpacked his belongings, and enjoyed the deep, unnatural quiet of the Oregon woods as night fell. It was on his 3rd afternoon that Mark found the first note. He was vacuuming the living room rug when he knocked a small end table against the wood paneling. When he bent down to pick up a fallen coaster, he spotted something tucked into the narrow gap between the baseboard and the wall. It was a folded piece of lined notebook paper. He smoothed it out on his knee. The writing was hurried and light. "To whoever came after me, do not leave the kitchen light on after midnight. It lets them see inside the pantry." Mark stared at the paper, a faint smile touching his face. He thought it was a joke left behind by Sarah to spook him. He threw the slip of paper into the trash bin and moved on with his evening. But late that night, while preparing tea in the dark kitchen, he found himself instinctively reaching for the light switch and hesitating. The silence of the house felt heavier now. The following afternoon, while cleaning out the top drawer of the hallway side table to make room for his notebooks, he found a second note. This one was taped to the underside of the wooden drawer. The handwriting matched the first note, but the message was longer. "Check the grandfather clock in the study every morning at 8. If the pendulum has stopped, do not restart it. Leave the room immediately." Mark walked into the study right away. The ancient grandfather clock stood against the dark oak wall, its brass pendulum swinging back and forth with a steady, hollow tick. Mark touched the cool glass door, feeling a sudden chill on his neck. Sarah had clearly been terrified when she wrote these notes. But why hide them in places only a house-sitter would look? That evening, Mark began searching the house systematically. Tucked inside the brass shade of a floor lamp in the library, he found a third note. "If you hear soft knocking inside the hallway closet, do not answer it. She thinks she is home, but she is not." By his 5th night, the initial amusement had vanished entirely, replaced by a cold, persistent anxiety. The house no longer felt empty. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind against the high glass windows made Mark freeze in place. That night, around 2 in the morning, Mark woke to the sound of soft, faint footsteps walking down the hallway outside his room. Remembering the notes, he stayed completely motionless in bed, staring at the bottom of the door. He watched as a shadow blocked the thin sliver of light beneath the frame. The shadow remained there for 20 minutes, perfectly still, before moving slowly back down the dark corridor toward the stairs. The next morning, Mark pulled off the metal air register cover in the master bathroom, driven by an urgent need to know how far this went. Inside the dust-covered vent, he found 2 more index cards pressed together. The first card contained Sarah's familiar frantic script. "I can hear breathing in the wall behind the headboard. I am leaving tomorrow morning." But it was the second card that made Mark's heart stop. The paper was identical, but the handwriting was completely different. It was thick, heavy, and slanting backward. She left 3 days ago. Now I am waiting for you. The notes were not just warnings left by Sarah for the next person. Something else had been living in the house alongside her. Something that had read her messages, tracked her routine, and waited until she abandoned the house to write its own reply. Mark stood in the dim light of the hallway, holding the 2 cards in his trembling hands. The house was deathly quiet, save for the slow, rhythmic ticking of the clock in the study. Suddenly, the ticking stopped. Mark slowly turned his head toward the dark archway leading to the study. A heavy silence settled over the room, colder and more suffocating than the damp forest air outside. If this creeping dread is keeping you on edge, please drop a like and subscribe to support the channel. Mark did not wait to investigate the clock. He grabbed his truck keys from the kitchen counter, dropping his phone in his hurry. As he sprinted down the narrow carpeted hallway toward the front door, he passed the dark, open entrance to the basement. From the bottom of the unlit wooden stairs, a voice spoke out into the dark. It was faint, dry, and raspy, perfectly mimicking the voice of the female agency manager who had hired him. "Mark, you forgot to lock the pantry." Mark did not look back. He shoved the front door open and ran into the night. He threw himself into his truck, starting the engine with shaking hands, and slammed his foot onto the gas pedal. As his headlights swept across the front of the isolated timber house, he saw something standing in the second-floor window. It was a tall, unnaturally thin, dark shape, pressed flat against the glass, motionless, watching his vehicle speed down the winding gravel driveway. Mark drove straight to the local sheriff's department in the neighboring town. When 2 deputies returned to inspect the property 3 hours later, they found the front door wide open. The house was completely empty. All of Mark's left-behind belongings had been neatly packed into his suitcases and placed by the front porch. The police investigation yielded no physical evidence of an intruder, no signs of forced entry, and no trace of the agency manager ever visiting the residence that night. Sarah was eventually located living 2 states away. She refused to speak about her 12 days in that house, hanging up the phone the moment the property address was mentioned. The owners of the home claimed to have no knowledge of any strange occurrences, cutting their trip short, but declining to press charges for the abandoned contract. To this day, Mark does not know who or what was writing those final notes, or how long it had been living quietly inside the dark corners of that isolated Oregon timber house. Years have passed, but the shadows of that house have never truly left him. Today, whenever Mark stays in an unfamiliar hotel room or moves into a new apartment, he performs the exact same quiet routine. He systematically removes the metal vent covers, checks behind the frame of every mirror, and slides his fingers beneath every drawer. He is not looking for lost items or old dust. He is searching for small pieces of folded paper, terrified that one day he will find a fresh index card written in that thick, backward slanting handwriting, welcoming him home. Sometimes the most dangerous things in our homes are not the secrets we keep, but the things watching us keep them. If you have ever experienced an unsettling encounter while house-sitting or staying in an isolated location, share your story in the comments below. Your account might be featured in a future episode. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey into the strange, dark, and mysterious. Until next time, keep your doors locked, check your hidden spaces, and stay safe out there in the dark.